Sir.
Oh,
There you go.
Karen. Oh, it was you?
Yeah.
Oh,
I have to do so many Zooms that I have to put a name because we don't always, not always in city council meetings on Zoom.
okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now Jake is supposed to be here except for around lunchtime.
Yeah, noon to 2, he's gone.
Yes.
Morning, everyone. This is Jake. I'm here.
Oh, great.
Morning, Jake.
Morning, Jake.
Well, then officially, since it's a minute past 9, we will officially start. So Eric, are you ready?
Sir.
Okay. Pursuant to Utah Code, West Valley City has determined that this meeting will be held electronically without an anchor location given the ongoing novel coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. West Valley City has determined the pandemic presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at an anchor location. This meeting will be held electronically. Members of the press and public are invited to view this meeting live on YouTube at www.youtube.com/user/WVCTV. Thank you. We were testing that, couple little things there to work on with it. With that, we note that we have a full quorum of council members present at this city council meeting, which we designate as our annual strategic planning meeting. With that, if tradition serves me correct, and I didn't pull up, I don't even know as I have an agenda, but anyway, probably there. But I think the first thing is Mr. Pyle is going to do a small preface and then maybe some financial information.
Yes, sir. Thank you. That is how the agenda usually rolls. And let me just make those comments, most of which are just going to be introductory to Jim. You as a council obviously live with us as a staff all year long. So you see what's going on in the city, and we talk about that on a weekly, if not even more than weekly basis, individually or as a group. And it's obviously been quite a year. I don't think I really need to go into that too much either, but there are a lot of good things about the past year that may not, or sort of might escape notice in the wash of everything else going on. We actually had a stable, I won't call it a great year, but I'll call it a stable year financially. Also a relatively stable year in terms of other things like public safety, crime, fires, police responses. Our police department itself is finally fully staffed, fully trained. And although we're always going to have a few vacancies there amongst our officers, they're really pretty much up and running at this point, and things are going well there. Commercially and economic development wise, we had a great year. We had a lot of capital investment into the city, and some new and I think long-term are going to be very effective projects and programs in terms of furthering our efforts towards neighborhood sustainability. I could go on. I'm not going to. Actually, despite all, I'll just summarize by saying, despite all of the trauma that we had during the year, and there was a lot of it, probably more on a individual disaster basis, if I can sort of tongue-in-cheek use that phrase, than any other year I've seen as a city manager here in the city. Despite all that, I think West Valley actually had a great year. So with that, I am going to turn the time over to Jim. He's going to make a very short presentation on the current status of the finances of the city. And then we will go from there. If the council has any questions or would like to start the strategic plan discussion today on those finances, that'd be great. Or as soon as Jim is finished, the main point being, it's all up to you. If you want to talk about finances or you want to go right into council discussion, however you'd like to proceed. So thank you all for this opportunity. Looking forward to the day, and I'm going to turn that time over to Jim. Jim?
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Pyle. I will begin sharing my screen and show the presentation. We'll have a little discussion. Happy to take any questions as we go through this. As you know, we've done this many times before, and be happy to address any concerns or things as we go through this. Okay, let's see. All righty. This should look a little bit different than what I've done in the past. Typically, I've presented some economic data on the forecast of what's going to happen with the economy, where we're going, what the major indices are saying with regards to what we expect in the upcoming year. That's kind of been thrown out the window a little bit. I think if you consult with just about any economist right now, they're trying to figure it out themselves, and they're willing to look maybe a couple of months ahead and then make some long-term prognostications that are based on information that really hasn't happened yet. So I decided to take a little bit of a different approach. Looking back before this fiscal year began to get started, and then kind of looking forward what we expect in the upcoming fiscal year. So as you'll remember, before the pandemic hit, which has really been a game changer, the economy was really quite healthy. We had record unemployment, we had sales tax growth, we had businesses that were healthy. It was really looking pretty well, and there was actually a concern that the economy was going to overheat. There was a term that I had never heard before in previous conversations called a melt up of the stock market, and they were concerned that that was going to happen, where things just kind of overheated, and that would eventually become our next bubble. Well, the bubble translated into a pandemic bubble where the world actually shut down, and because of that shutdown, unemployment began to skyrocket. Businesses were locked down. We introduced a new term called social distancing, and that's altered our daily interactions, the way that we buy products, the way that we seek entertainment. And because of all those changes that have occurred, we started to have concerns with regards to the municipal's ability to maintain services. We got calls from several of our rating agencies with regards to what we're going to do the next year. And apparently the impacts have been disparate across the country. So we'll talk about that looking forward a little bit. We didn't know what the human costs of the pandemic were. We didn't know how contagious it was, or the impacts, the death rates, whether it was even treatable. And of course, since then, we've had some great therapies and great vaccines that have been developed. Utah was actually doing very well compared to the US and continues to do well. Now, looking forward, we can look at the last, 9 months or 10 months since the pandemic hit. And a lot of those things that we expected, for example, a drop in sales tax, which is a major source of our revenue, did not occur. We built the original budget with an expected reduction of approximately 20% in revenues. And with that, Mr. Pyle and with the acceptance of the council, build in some great flexibilities to anticipate that drop, which has not occurred. So that's good news for us. Utah has maintained a low unemployment rate. I think right now we're about the lowest in the country, a little over 4%. We are having some impacts in the city. We're seeing some of our smaller businesses close, particularly in the restaurant business area. We're seeing some of our business licensing revenue we're expecting it to come in below projections, and that's largely due to either businesses closing or outside events not being held. For example, tent sales, Cinco de Mayo celebrations, any type of things like that where we license a number of businesses for social events. Those have not been occurring. And so those are hurting. But on the other hand, we've far exceeded the original projections. And it's my pleasure to report that I believe that the city is in good financial condition, especially considering the shock that we've gone through. Another thing that's helped is the stimulus money that came out through the CARES Act that has helped us cover a lot of the impacts from the COVID crisis. I know that's hit pretty hard in our public safety sectors with regards to fire and police, with overtime, personal protective gear, things like that. So we're very grateful that we've had some help with that. And then looking forward, as we prepare next year's budget, we expect that the sales tax will continue to grow, and we'll go through this. Property tax maintains, and we'll talk about that one also. But so much of this economic recovery is hinging on the successful rollout of the vaccine, which right now, as you know, is going gangbusters, and they're hoping that the promise of an effective vaccine holds true, and we can get back to our business of providing services, and the citizens get back to their lives of providing for their families. So that's kind of what we're looking at to begin with. And with that, I'll move into the current state of our financial position in the city. The reminder that this is kind of where we are with our budget. In 2021, which is the current fiscal year, we have a budget of about 85 million. The total budget of the city is about $142 million, and that includes things that are not included in the general fund, such as the sanitation funds. It includes some of the other operational funds outside of the general operations of the city. But this is the main operating budget of the city. We have a good balance, I believe, of revenues. We have our property tax, which is about 38%. We have sales tax, which is about 31%. And we actually projected that at 26. Right now, we're expecting that to far exceed that. It'll be more around a third of our revenues. Some of the other revenues, as we go through those, utility taxes will be an interesting discussion. Justice Court, for example, has been effectively shut down during COVID. We're hoping it's going to reopen its doors as they figured out how to continue to conduct the legal proceedings for civil and criminal cases. And I know that it'll look probably a little bit different going forward. So that's a picture of our current finances. To look into the revenue specifically, property tax, this is growth since 2006. We hadn't had an adjustment in our property tax revenue for a number of years, and that occurred then. It's relatively flat due to what's called truth in taxation. The city collects the same amount of revenue that we collected the previous year, plus any new growth. And new growth is defined as new construction, new buildings that have come online, and is not inclusive of just inflation. So if we're going to have new growth in our revenue, it has to be by new construction. We budgeted 32.5, and right now we're projecting about 31.9. It's not exact science on what we're collecting on property tax. We have very good trends and very good analysis that go into that. We're projecting next year about 32 million, and that is the main source of our revenue, and is also the one source that we have direct control over. Go into our sales tax collections, which I talked about. This represents a little bit more of an interesting trend. Over year for the last 10 years, we've averaged 4.3% growth, and that trend's actually continued through the current fiscal year. Yeah, due to the pandemic, our original projections were about 26 million. We're expecting to collect close to $31 million, 30,700,000. Then we expect to collect about 31.2 in the year going forward. That holds with current trends and it holds with what our collections are. Although people have changed the way that they buy, a lot of that's being online and done by delivery. The state has now changed the way that we collect sales taxes, and many of these online sales, if not any significant amount of online sales, is now picked up and comes back to the city. So that's been a very beneficial change in the way the state collects those. Utility taxes have continued to decline, and there's a number of things that we could talk about, but probably seem a little bit intuitive. We collect about $9 million in utilities taxes, and that's made up of 4 sectors. We have cable TV, electricity, telecommunications, which is your telephone, and then natural gas. Probably the biggest impact there you can see is our telecommunications tax, which, as people have switched from home phones to either cell phones or to other means of communication, we've gone from a little over $2 million to less than $1 million in the last 12 years. Natural gas has continued it fluctuates quite a bit, but as homes become more efficient and as the price of gas has remained relatively stable, we've seen a little bit of a drop in that. Electricity has also suffered from the same I don't know if I'd call it suffered, but benefited from efficiencies as people get Energy Star equipment and LED lighting. I know as a city, we've taken a very aggressive approach to become more energy efficient. That all impacts our electricity tax, so that has continued to decline. The budgeted expenses, this is how the city operates with the revenues that we're given. 50% of it goes to public safety, that's police and fire. And then the rest of the budget goes to administrative costs. Now, administrative is not just the cost of administration. That includes human resources. It includes the cultural center. It includes information technology, all those departments that are under the city manager's office, which there's a number of those there. Then the rest of the services for the city kind of roll out from there. Public Works, non-departmental, are the transfers to some of our other entities, for example, the Maverick Center, the Fitness Center, Harmon Home Operations, things like that. Also the debt service for Utopia is in there. So with that concludes my main presentation, and be happy to take it wherever you'd like to from there.
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
As we were putting this all together, I thought we were including that one fund balance slide. I think we've included it in a different file, or maybe it's here. Would you show and discuss that one too?
Yep, absolutely. I can certainly find that, and I have that one ready.
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
Look at that, the diagram you just sent it, meant you to present it to us.
The budget?
Yeah, the budget. Which area you think we can increase more revenue?
You were talking about the revenue slide?
Yeah.
Okay, the one that we actually have control of is the sales tax. I'm sorry, the property tax revenue. Sales tax is largely dependent upon the market and the number of retail entities within the city. So the only one that we can really control is property tax. That's by design, and the way the state legislature set up our operations. So
beside that one, is there any other area we can increase?
We do have an influence on fees. However, fees are influenced by the cost of providing services, for example, business licensing, impact fees, things like that. And they have to be backed up by surveys. We regularly look at those. And I think you will probably remember that periodically those come to the city council for consideration of changes when the staff feels it's appropriate. So there is some movement in there that's available. It's based on formulas and calculations that are required in order to increase those fees.
Yeah, but how that's gonna compare with other cities regarding the fees we have here in our city?
Yeah, that's, as far as percentage, I don't have that. Our most cities are a little bit unique in the types of services they provide. As far as the rates, that would be part of the rate study when we consider those fee changes. So that's something that I don't have the data on, but that's how those rates are calculated.
Other places in not this valley, but other state, they keep the property taxes moving very slowly, not increase as fast like we have, or the state we have here. But is that not the way we can do? We can increase other areas, so slow down with the property tax.
The way that our revenues are set up, property tax is largely the only one we really have major control over.
Because we have okay.
Have a lot of different rules on those. Some of them rely on income tax, which we do not have. And if you look across the states, some cities have been impacted very harshly with this pandemic because the income tax, the income of their citizens has really been hit. Gratefully, we don't have that. The state has set up the budget system such that we rely on a fairly stable revenue, which is property tax. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I was going to bring up that fund balance slide. Okay, you should see that. Okay, this is a history of the dollar amount of our unrestricted fund balance, which is basically the funds that are held in our general fund to cover the cushions and impacts of financial downturns, and also provide us the opportunity to take advantages of opportunities that come up, and just provides that cushion. So our last audit, which was just completed, is fiscal year 2020. And we ended up with a $19 million unrestricted fund balance that represents about 22% of the general fund expenditures. The state code states that the maximum amount you can hold in your general fund is 25% of your budgeted expenditures. That would be about $21 million.
And Jim, there's also a minimum, isn't there?
There is. It's 5% of those expenditures.
So what was the maximum?
It's
25.
25. So 5 to 25, and we're at the top level of that.
Yep.
Yeah, the 25%. Now, when you start bumping up against that, we had a drop, if you'll notice, in 2018 to 2019. That was when the city elected to move a portion of their general fund over to their capital improvement funds so that they could handle things like fleet purchases and a few other projects that had been online. There were a lot of capital projects that we moved monies over in anticipation of that high level of fund balance, which allowed us to cover some of those things that we'd been hoping to take care of for a number of years.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Appreciate the presentation. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you.
Now, from that, I'm just going to make a couple of statements that seem to be my takeaway. One is the city has, I guess the term, weathered very well the recession caused by the pandemic, better than many cities. Because we're not heavily dependent upon tourism. That portion that was the hardest hit didn't affect us that much. There were individual things that affected us, like the courts, but overall we seem to come through the pandemic fairly well. And there's nothing on the horizon to suggest any significant change from that. In other words, essentially, when we come to the budget this year, there won't be any significant changes. Am I saying anything that is out of line?
No, I think that's fairly accurate, Mayor. I would add a couple of pieces that will affect that. One is you can see by Jim's presentation on the revenue side that we really have weathered the storm very well, especially in terms of sales tax. And in the short term, right off the bat, I think we are fine. You can see that long term, especially all the other sources of revenue that we have, other than sales tax, which continues to grow, the rest of them are not growing. So whether that's property tax, which, as Jim mentioned, the council largely makes a conscious decision every year whether to grow it, whether to let it slip a little bit, or whether to maintain it exactly at the level before. That's a policy decision. But the rest of them are influenced by, mostly, I would say, in one way, growth of the city. Whereas in the past, we had high levels of growth. Now we are starting to mature. We are slowing in that growth, and you are seeing other external things affect those other sources of revenue, especially in the utilities and franchise fee type of area. So short term, we're good. Long term, we've got some policy decisions we're going to have to face or figure out across time. And that was a long-winded way of making the one point. The second point I did want to make, Mayor, is that even though I believe that you're correct, we're not going to see any major changes here in the next few months as we finalize the budget. There are a lot of moving pieces that are not resolved yet out of the pandemic. Jim mentioned a couple of, or alluded to a couple of them in terms of places where we've lost revenue, but made up for it in other areas. Like, for example, the CARES money that we received. We received a lot. We received it in reimbursement for expenses that had already incurred under the federal guidelines, but then we also had to make other expenditures that bit into that funding. In fact, we're already $1.25 million or above in direct expenditures above and beyond what we were, what we used the guidelines for to justify those CARES funds as they came in. In addition, there are other revenue shortages that you don't see just by looking at that picture yet. For example, in the fitness center, we have probably lost, between the initial stages of the pandemic and where we're at in this year, upwards, maybe not quite, but upwards of $1 million net. Parking out at USANA, there was no season at all out there. That's going to cost us roughly $360,000 in lost revenue by the time the year has settled out by the end of June, right? Now, all of that said, we do have the money to cover it because we did receive those reimbursements, and we did have better sales tax projections than we thought we would have. But we'll be coming back in budget openings to settle those out. We'll be asking for money from that fund balance to cover those expenses as we need to. We're going to, of course, do everything we can to avoid that or minimize it because it's in our interest. And of course, we want to have that fund balance as high as we can. All that is really a longer way of saying that when all the pieces stop moving, where will we be? I think you're right. We've weathered the storm pretty well. We'll be pretty stable, but we'll still face the same increasing expense questions that we always face every year.
So,
Thank you, Mayor.
Wayne, I have a question. That
Yes.
$2 million that we did for the redevelopment down at, well, the $200,000 at a time we're using to pedazzle, upgrade some businesses. That money we put over in the RDA, should we
That's
not have put
RDA.
that in so soon, or?
Yeah, no, we're fine. Like I said, all of this will shuffle out. We do have the money to cover over all of those expenses and even maintain our fund balance and possibly even increase it at some level. But it's not I guess one of the reasons I was making that point is if you look at that fund balance chart, it looks very optimistic, right? Looks like we've gained in what would have been a bad year, some $3 or $4 million above where we were at the end of the last year. That's a little deceiving in the sense that we will have to cover some of those expenses before the current fiscal year settles out. Now, there also are some other funds still that have come in that don't show in that number because that was audited number as of the end of June. Like we got a CARES payment in October. So that'll add to the fund balance, but when you subtract out the expenses and all that, we'll probably end up seeing an increase. I just want to caution everybody that you're still going to see some of these coming through the budget opening processes as they do.
I have a
So
couple
how
of
much
questions.
did, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to ask how much we did get in total from the CARES Act.
We got 8 million. By formula, we should have gotten 12, which is part and parcel of that whole argument with the county that ended up becoming public, regrettably so, but frankly, they weren't budging and there was nowhere else to move to make our point. And if they had, this is actually one of the points that I wanted to bring up in that discussion. If they had given us just that money that was established by formula, we'd obviously be that much more comfortable from a cushion standpoint as those numbers all settled out.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So on the franchise fees and utility taxes and all of those things that are dwindling, have we, or maybe it's time to take a longer view, some sort of analysis where we say, okay, they're going down this way, but it seems to me they're never going to get to zero, right? They're going to level off somewhere. We're still going to have some tax or some gas, some electricity, some phones, I would guess, of some sort. But if we kind of look at, okay, well, here's where they would bottom out, and this is probably how long it will take, and plan to make up the difference. What's some analysis like that, has it been done, or should it be done now? Are we about ready to look at it?
We actually do that from a year-to-year basis, Steve. So great question. And really, I think you're also right. All of those revenue sources are going to stay relatively stable with possibly some minor growth over time, except for that telecommunications tax. That one could literally go to almost zero. You remember what it shows now is about 600,000. Where it was at its height, it was almost 2.5 million. And there's no way I see that trend going any other way than people are continuing to get rid of their landlines and their dedicated telephone service. And that's the only place you collect that revenue off of. The other one, the picture's a little cheerier. The solutions to the question, yeah, we've done the analysis. We know where the dollars are going, where they'll be at, where our growth factors at, where our expenses are on an annual basis growth-wise. The solutions are more limited. You can go and argue for increased legislative support or flexibility. We can raise property taxes. We can continue our economic development efforts, which we do and have been successful at. But it's pretty clear that in the long run, at least under the current structure, it's going to be hard to maintain revenue growth at the same level that our operational expenditures will grow.
Okay. But I mean, I understand that, like on the telephone tax, and we've just been absorbing the hit every year.
Right.
Where the hit is making up for it. But, and maybe it will go all the way to zero. And maybe it's okay to just take it on a year by year basis. I'm just wondering if some of these things could be projected out and planned for, or maybe they don't really need to be because the decrease is so gradual, and other than the telephone tax, it's not going to bottom out. So, I mean, I understand that you are looking at that, and you have to, because it's a revenue source, and how are we going to make our budget? We have to calculate the revenue sources and the expenditures. I just wondered if there's anything that maybe could be shared with us at a later date, or the planning to show that we've considered this and taken a long view on, because you did mention that, I think you said something about on a short term, we're fine, but on the long view, we're going to be hit. We're going to have to accommodate this in the future.
Right.
The other question I had was, do we know of any, or should we know of any judgment levy issues that are coming up, or problems that we might be facing as far as our property taxes?
We'll have some amount of the same judgment levy question that we do every year, but we won't know what that is for a few months yet.
Yeah, because it seemed at one point we had some long drawn out lawsuit that was taking forever, and it eventually hit us. But we don't know of anything else like that that we know for sure is in process.
No.
Okay, that's good.
Well,
Thanks.
that it's good that we don't have any right now and that we don't know of any, but our past experiences shown that sometimes the county themselves aren't tracking and end up being surprised, and then it come to surprise us. So I can't say that we won't see that, but we don't currently.
Well, that would have to be a lawsuit that's filed. Do we have somebody to track and see if lawsuits have been filed against the county to reduce their taxes, or you just wait for the county to tell us?
We don't wait. We stay in contact with the county, but what we ask the county and what the county tells us aren't always a straight channel of information. And by that, what I mean is they themselves aren't always tracking what's going on, meaning from one hand, right hand to left hand sort of information. So for example, what makes me think of that is this last time we had this $1 million hit. It was either the last time or the one before that. Literally a 20+ year lawsuit that the finance department, for lack of whatever they call themselves over there, Jim would know specifically which office, was not aware of from the legal side of the house at the county, that the county was either, and I can't even remember if they settled or if they lost a judgment or whatever, but the finance arm of the county let us know as soon as they knew. We could have called them and they wouldn't have known. We could have called the legal department and they might not have told us. So it's kind of like one of these secret password games where you can call and ask them, but if you don't know who the right person is or what the right question is, or how to approach it, they're not necessarily going to give you the information you're looking for.
I guess we could grandma request any lawsuits that have been served on them. That sounds a little bit onerous. Have to create a department for that, or just watch the court docket. But that's kind of a hit and miss and subject to interpretation. What is this lawsuit really about?
Exactly.
Exactly.
You're hitting on the difficulty right there.
That one actually went back over decades. It took them decades to settle that one. And so it was kind of a surprise when it actually happened at the county and us too. They gave us some forewarning because of the size. That was unusual. It's just really hard to tell what's going to shake out and what's in the works.
And Jim's being generous when he says they gave us some forewarning. By forewarning, what he's talking about, by my memory, is about 8 weeks after literally 2 decades plus of being aware that this was going to be a problem eventually.
Okay, thanks.
Wayne, you know what might be helpful when we do the new budget, not the budget opening, but our next year's budget, is to show a few key statistics. One, what was the dollar reduction that impacted our city from COVID-19, this recession that came about? And then a second thing was on the expense side. What additional expenses did we incur because of COVID-19? And then to show how we covered that. And there were basically 3 areas. One was we got some money from CARES, and these different things that the federal government provided us. We cut some expenditures. And we took some money from fund balance, mainly. I don't want every detail, but to say, here's what happened, and here's how we dealt with it.
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor.
The gross numbers. And I don't think we need to go into each of the different revenue sources kind of thing, like how much the courts were cut. I think we just say, this is the impact on the city. And citizens, this is how we handled it.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely, Mayor.
Council, does that sound reasonable? I know that's something that I personally would be interested in. And I know people will ask, because when the budget comes around, everyone's going to say, what'd you do? I say, well, here's what happened. So, okay.
That sounds
Anything
good.
else with budget or finances?
I would like to ask for one more thing.
Sure.
When it comes to the budget every year, I would like to see a minimum of a 5-year plan, what we project revenue to increase, expenses, and what is the anticipated amount of money we need to make up so that we understand, and if they're a 5-year or a 10-year plan, that kind of gives us, if we go about at this rate, we're going to need a 3% property tax increase every year, or a 1% based on our expenses and such, so that we're making an informed decision about what the effect of a property tax increase may be this year or next year, and how it affects our sustainability of our budget long term, so that we're not getting behind and we're not counting on the fund balance to always bail us out, that we have a projected plan of what we know and then we adjust it when a year comes and our things go up or down, but at least we have an idea of what we need to do long term.
So, Karen, we already do that and have presented that to you in years past. In fact, I think we've only not included that projection in this year and maybe last year. So we can put that slide back in the annual presentation as well as the budget document. But yeah, we already do that. We know what that number is. It's very easy to see. It's a line chart that shows you from the point going forward and the point going backward, what those actual changes were and how we made up for them and what the projected changes are out. And we do that. How far out is that chart that we usually, that we always produce, but usually show Jim go? It's at least 10 years, if not further.
Yeah, I mean, it's all based on formulas and trends, so we can put it out as far as we want, but it gets a little bit
Right.
way hypothetical if you go out too far.
Yeah, that's why I thought 5-year would be a good stable, but 10-year would give us a good idea. But I know 10 years far too far to really understand what if there's going to be another COVID or another stock markets crash. There's a lot of different variables, but at least it'll give us an idea of where we're going.
Right.
And we've got,
I'm just on board with all of you, Mayor, and also Councilwoman Land. Just try to maybe also, I know you guys have that before, but I think maybe pull out a number where you're gonna cover all those if there's something that's go wrong. I mean, like communication is declining basically, it's almost every year, and in the future, I believe it's gonna go down more and more. People that use cell phone these days. So yeah, something like that. That example, one of the examples we have. So maybe just pull out all the numbers where we can basically just for 5 years and see how we deal with that, how we tackle with those. Yeah.
Well, a projection of this type is totally dependent upon the assumptions that you make. Now,
Yep.
if you just go back and say, well, let's look at the last 10 years and just continue that trend, that's pretty straightforward. Jim was talking about, some formulas they use, which sometimes work. But when we get them, we have to understand that, they're guesses. And as you saw this year with the pandemic, things can change, things that aren't in our control. So although I like the concept of the 5-year projection, I think we ought to note on there, and it doesn't have to be 6-inch letters, but it ought to be pretty clear that, this is based upon historical trends and assuming that they continue generally as they have in the past, this is what we could anticipate. And I like that, Councilwoman Lang, that we can identify then what normally would be an increase in cost if nothing were different. And Wayne
Yeah.
has said it's around what, 2.5%, 3%.
Yep, right on.
And so if we do nothing, we go that much further in the hole, or we have to, cut something or take from fund balance, reserve funds or something.
I'd add a comment to that as well, Mayor. That 2.5% and 3%, a lot of times people just believe that just represents a natural inflation rate. And that's partly true. But what you don't see just looking at those two lines is on an annual basis, the other policy decisions that go into that, right? You might have a hotter economy than 3%, but the council makes the policy decision to not increase property taxes or we don't get any other revenue increase. So we cut operations. So there are a lot of things that go into that 2.5% to 3% on an annual basis, other than just where's the economy at generally. But what we do know is that pretty generally, that's what it's going to be, for whatever the reasons might be from year to year and wherever the emphasis on those various factors are. But pretty much that's where it's going to be. Now, the great thing about that projection that we do and the way that Jim does it is it does show you both what sort of that assumption, kind of gradual increase will be, just like you're talking about, Mayor. Shows that, and therefore you should be aware of the assumptions that are being made into that. But it also shows back, and in back you see what plays out in terms of actual ups and downs in the economy or policy choices like increasing revenues in property tax or not. That sort of thing happens. So it's a pretty succinct view. It doesn't tell the whole story. Obviously, there's a lot that it does tell the whole story. It doesn't tell the detail of the story, so to speak, but it gets us there.
So Wayne,
Yes.
I would like to ask for something more than just, it's 2% every year and we go on. I would like to know.
Sure. I
So-
mean, that's what I'm telling you, Karen. There's a lot that goes into that 2 to 3%. So, or what are you thinking specifically?
Well, I would like, every department should have a 5-year plan of what their capital improvements need to be. Like the pump at the golf course, that should have been on their maintenance
We have
plan
that.
and knew
Yeah.
exactly which year.
Right. And I'm sorry to
So
interrupt
those
you.
things can be worked into that projected budget I don't know what fire department's going to need a new ladder truck in 5 years. So work that into that budget, that in 5 years, we have to have the funds or the capability of purchasing this and putting it into the debt service. And then another department says, well, in 3 years, we need a new roof. So that we know all of that going forward, what our capital improvements are, what our maintenance, our maintenance is built into the regular budget. But just those capital improvements, to know what those are going to be, so we get the funds available when we're going to need them. And we know that it's not we need a $3.5 million truck or something. Just planning so we're understanding and not trying to catch up later. Because I know you guys talk about that.
Right. We do have that. We do that. That's exactly the number that gets accumulated in the program modification process of the budget every year. And frankly, those numbers are so far above and beyond and this because you've seen this before in whether it's a fire truck discussion or whether it's a building discussion, that it doesn't really make sense to add it into that operational projection that we're talking about. We figure it out and we do things like, you'll remember the bubble chart facility plan discussion that we are just now kind of finishing up, right? And the reason we started that particular process is because we had a funding source identified, right? We figured out a plan in which to come up with that money without increasing property taxes or having to find other sources. The numbers that you're
Right.
looking for are there, but they're not planned into the budget because there's no money to get them. Now we can show you all those numbers in a different way from a program modification standpoint. And again, like I say, that number literally is probably 2-3 times what the annual operational budget is. So it's not as simple as just saying, here's your 5 to 10 year or 30-year capital improvement needs, and let's just add it operationally to the budget. You'd be increasing your property taxes on a, I don't know, 5 to 10%, just a guess, basis every year. Your point is well taken in that you're uncomfortable about knowing what those are, and we need to find you another way for you to know what those numbers are, and then maybe you do have that policy discussion how to put them in there. All I'm really saying is we do look at that, we have that, and as the needs come up, we have a number of ways of dealing with that. Whether that is the number's a really big one and we're going to need 10 years to absorb it, and so we come and we propose to use some debt service, right? Or the number is a big number, it's not an insignificant number, but it's a handleable number within the fund balance reserve that we have, like that $250,000 pump you're talking about at the golf course. That was literally on the program modification capital plan list as far back as the last time we did a capital improvement plan, which you as a council all reviewed. You'll remember it had like $400 or $500 million of projects on it. And some of those we chose to deal with on a policy basis in the short term, and some of them we pushed out, and some of them we kind of had to deal with as we finally exceeded all ability to extend the lifespan of them, right?
Well, and that's just it. I would like us to have like this pump, his average life is 10 years. So we'll know in 10 years that needs to be in that year's budget, or we replace it at 8 years. I mean, if it accidentally or something happens, it goes out in 5, then yes, that's just a weird whatever. But if it's a 10-year pump, then we schedule it and we have it in the budget. So it's not a surprise. And if we decide to use the capital or the fund balance to take care of these capital improvements or maintenance issues, then I think we need to build that in and have a specific fund that we know is going to be for that. And we have 10 million sitting there. If we have a pump go out, we replace it. I mean, whichever the method you want to go about it, I just think we need to know what those are going to be long-term and plan for them instead of having them be a surprise.
Right. So one other comment to that. It's not like I don't and wouldn't enjoy the comfort of having that money built in that way, but doing it that way can lead incentive-wise to other choices. So for example, once again, using the exact pump that you're talking about, the lifespan of that probably was something on the order of 10 to 15 years, but we got 25 years out of it. And we didn't spend an inordinate amount of money doing dumb repairs on it. We would have brought the purchase back to you earlier if that had been the case. But if we make the policy decision to build a fund around those sorts of decisions, that'd be great from a management standpoint. That'd make my life a whole lot easier, but it might not be the best course from an operational standpoint. If you build the money in that way, but then are less likely to have the resources or the flexibility to make other operational changes like raises or growth or new programs, that sort of thing, which you then have already dedicated that money to. Of course, that doesn't mean you can't think those policy decisions as that money is available later on, but that really is just the position we're in right now. So I'm not arguing that we shouldn't do that. I'm just telling you that I'm just stating or adding to the conversation that when you do that, it doesn't give you necessarily a clear and therefore easy. That's the word I'm looking for. It's not just when you do that, it doesn't give you necessarily a clear and easy path to where you think you are going or where you want to go. Having said all that, those numbers are there. We absolutely have them. We can get them for you however you'd like to see them in any way.
I think
thank you.
I think we just need to see that program mods maybe on a regular basis, because I understand that I mean, every department's thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to need a new roof. 10 years, maybe it'll be 15 years. But if we put them in the budget, we have to have the revenue source, or we're out of budget. We've got that money earmarked. And then like on the pump, if we didn't spend it at that 10 years, where's that money going to go? Is it going to be saved for another 15 years, or is it, I mean, I feel like that money's more at risk having been allocated and not spent than having to come up with it when we need it because we know it's coming down the line. I think maybe for my comfort level, if we're seeing that program mod list, which comes up to an astronomical amount of money that we're never going to have. I mean, I can do that with my personal budget, right? I want all these things, and yet I'll never have the money to get them all. But, you know, I think that would satisfy my comfort level. I have one kind of ticky-tack housekeeping thing on the budget, and I appreciate my big budget book. I've been enjoying reading that. And as I did, some of the health theater things have been changed over to Harmon Hall. Some remain as health theater. So those things probably ought to be sorted out. But I think there's a bigger answer to that, which is maybe we should just call it theater, because maybe it won't even be Harmon Hall forever. And same thing with the Maverick Center. Maybe we should call it Stadium instead of Maverick Center in our budgets. The Harmon Home, I think, is a permanent name. But the other things, I remember we used to have UDOT signs and UTA signs that pointed us to the Delta Center. And then all of a sudden it wasn't the Delta Center anymore. And it took months or year to change the signage over. And I just think that to not have to ever deal with these name changes, we just clean it up and call it Stadium, Theater, whatever else, instead of, you know, if I'm reading the budget and I'm looking at Health Center Theater Fund, and then later we're talking about the Harmon Hall Fund, and if I didn't know, I wouldn't know it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely an easy edit for sure.
Well, but here I'm okay with that, Steve. But thing is, the share we have with the Mavis Center is what percentage in there we have.
I didn't catch that, Tom.
What percentage the share we have with the Mavis Center, because we have a partnership there, is that right?
Right. Well, they're a sponsor for a certain limited number of years, and that may renew or it may go somewhere else. Or, I mean, it's not the Maverick Center forever necessarily.
Right. I agree with
you. Maybe to just insert or clarify a little bit, insert some clarification or ask for it. I think what I understood Steve to be talking about is really just the budget document anyway. So that's not really going to have any effect on our contractual advertising or sponsorship relationship with Maverick or any place else. So I think that'd be fine.
I mean, our tickets would still say Maverick Center and whatever. We'd still refer to it, but just kind of in our ongoing, this is the stadium budget, this is the theater budget. We might have something else in the future. Maybe we have a Veterans Hall budget, and maybe we don't call it by some other name for a while or whatever we're doing. It's just a real ticky-tack housekeeping kind of issue.
I can't help myself. Of course, thanks, Nicole. No one else saw that but you. So maybe Don do. But anyway, I do need to make a couple of comments. Councilwoman Lang's comments were very interesting, because there's two ways to approach large purchases. One is, you know, setting up an earmark or setting up a fund that you put money into over time and then pay cash for the purchase. The other is to start at the other end, which we do already on some items, bonding and financial leases, where we finance that project and pay for it over time. The reason governments normally don't use a sinking fund, you know, setting up a fund and filling it up, is it doesn't work all the time. And the reason why is city managers and elected officials are under a great deal of pressure. And if you have money on the table and don't spend it, employees and taxpayers say, why do you have that money? And saying, well, we're saving it to buy this item that we know we'll need in the future, doesn't work very well. And so earmarks were an attempt by elected officials to force the issue and say, I want money to always go to this thing. But then that reduces the flexibility when you come to a recession to be able to move your funds around where you need them the most. For example, here, if the city had a budget like the state and funding for the fitness center goes down, you would not be allowed to move money over to cover the fitness center from somewhere else in the budget. So that flexibility that's built there is pretty critical for long-term stability. Now, I may not agree with everything that's done in the budget, but I will say that we need to be careful about making any significant changes. Providing informations or projections is fine, but before we start changing leases and setting aside funds for purchases of items, remember that what we're doing has worked pretty well, generally speaking. It's not perfect. So one of the things that I fought at the legislature was, don't make changes. Our system may not be perfect, but at least we understand it and it's been working. So I just throw that in as a caution. I'm not speaking for or against anything other than to say, be cautious, be slow to change what we're doing unless there's a problem. So there's my soapbox on finances for the year. I had to get something in, during our strategic plan meeting. So thank you. Anything else on finances or budget that you want to bring up? By the way, I agree with Steve on the name thing. That makes sense. That's not a major change. So.
Well, and I think, Mayor, the reason I have two issues with the leases. We have the money and we shouldn't be paying out interest on money that's sitting there making 0.5% when we're paying out 1 3/4. That's the residents' money. We should be being responsible with it. And that little bit of difference is just a little bit of money, but every little bit counts. And then I think the other issue I have with it is they always put tax-free lease bond. We don't, or lease payments. The city doesn't pay taxes. So to put it's a tax exempt lease is kind of deceptive and makes it sound like, ooh, we're doing so good by having tax exempt, but we're not subject to tax. So to me, that's not being forthright with it. If as a personal business person, I said I want a tax-free lease or tax exempt lease, that makes sense because I pay taxes. City doesn't. So to me, that's deceiving.
Yeah, the reason we use that terminology is because of the lease and the legal and the financial documentation as it has to be adopted, not because we're trying to market
Right.
any advantage to the citizens.
Yeah, if you use that lease. Now, Karen, you're right. I cannot refute anything that you said. In fact, I agree in some ways. But my tradition is to always not rock the boat too much.
Even if the boat is sinking.
Just enough to worry Wayne and Jim, and just enough.
Well, since my name was mentioned there, we could bring up that lease document that Karen asked for and show you what goes on down those lease. I mean, once again, this is a policy discussion. I don't disagree with Karen's factual assertions. The only reason we have any disagreement at all from a recommendation standpoint is this makes the operations easier to do and follows that philosophy of trying to keep that tax burden as low as possible. If you guys want to look at that right now, and Jim brings that up, what you will see is, and we don't just have the money sitting around. If we wanted to buy out those leases and fund the different department operations at a level that would buy all that up front, we'd have to make a significant upfront investment in that. And that may not be a policy decision you want to make. So far, you have not, as an elected group across the years. But we're always open to that conversation. If you guys want to do that, that'd be great.
Yeah,
The
if you
fleet-
have,
The fleet's a perfect, oh, sorry, Lars, go ahead.
I've been thinking about this since Karen brought this up again, and I'm also concerned about our wasting money by paying interest, but you know, in the long run, it really doesn't save us that much to pay up front. I did some calculations. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Just with the numbers from the one we approved last week, I think, for those computers, it was 114,000. Can you see my screen?
right, yep,
And we're making a payment of this much every quarter. So even though it only costs 114, we pay a total of 118,000. Can you follow all this? I know it's numbers. The mayor's probably loving this, but maybe the rest of us not so much. But with the way the inflation works, an interest rate of 1.75% is a really great deal that we're getting. I did a little research, not very much, and found that the consumer price index for the past 10 years was 1.827%. So this amount of money right now is a different amount, even if we paid that same dollar amount in the future. So using December 2020 dollars, this amount that we pay in only 3 months will only be worth this much. And so even though we pay this in 4 years, we're really not paying that much in comparison to what it is right now. That amount of money will not buy as much in 2024 as it could right now. In fact, if the inflation goes up the same amount, that will only be worth this much in today's dollars. And so by the end of our payments, we've really paid in that same value a little bit less than we would have paid if we had paid it up front now. And the past 2 years, the interest has been over 3%. And if that was the case, we would be saving our taxpayers that much money by extending this. If we had extended it more than 4 years, we would be saving even more because we're paying with future dollars that's not worth as much. I know it's a little complicated, but it's really not a bad deal for us. I think that we should maybe borrow more, but I think it's wise not to. But it's really not costing our taxpayers more money by financing this way.
So
So
Lars,
did
you're an economist as well as a math teacher.
Hey, it's all math.
It is all math. So I think I've seen a lot of these things before in my work with talking about this dollar's not worth that dollar. I think for the discussion, I'd just like to ask if Jim's in agreement with this. Does this sound right?
Far be it for me to argue with a math teacher.
Okay, so when we're doing the calculation that, you know, we're paying this much interest and we're earning this much interest, it obviously looks like we're losing money. But when we're committing dollars that aren't worth as much as other dollars, rather than paying for it up front, yeah, we are saving money.
But where's the analysis as to what that $4,000 we save could go forward and pay for and earn us, pay down other things faster, help buy other things we need? That $4,000 could go towards something else instead of just interest. And there's not an analysis of what that 4,000 could have done for us.
Part of the analysis that's really hard to get a handle around is the opportunity cost of the money. There's, you know, we can put it in the spreadsheet and tell you how much it's worth in an estimated CPI, or you know, what we can earn. We can project those out fairly well, but it's really hard to quantify the flexibility from not coming up with large amounts of money each year to pay for items that we're going to have to replace. To Wayne's point, if we can get 20 years out of a 10-year item, and you know, how do you quantify that gain? It makes it a little bit more challenging, I'll admit, but I think these are all types of discussions that need to be made in order to make good, sound budgeting decisions.
So Jim, it's kind of like the pump. We have these leases on a 4-year rotation so that they definitely get replaced. But if there's a year that we can't afford to replace them, then it's like the pump. Maybe we can get 4, 5, 6, 7 years out of them instead of 4. I would rather see a policy that we replace them every 4 years, but the money is there to do it. And all we're doing is taking those quarterly payments and putting them at the front. It'd take a little bit to, as each lease comes up, the next lease, we front it instead of leasing, and just replacing them all with pay as you go instead of wasting or losing that money to interest when that money could go for other things. I know 4,000 by itself isn't a lot, but I don't know if you have how much we pay out total in interest on all of these leases or not.
Yeah, I do have that. I haven't prepared the actual interest cost of all of our notes for presentation at this time, but yeah, we have all of that available, obviously.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see, so that you're making an informed decision of, you know, if it's 4,000 on this one and we have 10, that's 40,000. And then it just slowly would go up. And then also we could look at that and see what it would take in our budget to get ahead of it instead of always being behind.
I can tell you that number right off the top of my head, Karen, and it's not going to be exact. Yeah, but it's going to be pretty close. The debt schedule that we make on our lease payments across the years, if you exclude some big item that ends up getting dumped into that, is roughly between $750,000 and let's call it 900,000 a year. So let's just say it's 800,000 a year, which is going to be pretty close when you average across them. So at that 2% or slightly less than that, you're roughly paying $30,000, $35,000 a year in interest on that $800,000 debt. Is that far off, Jim?
No, that's very close.
Okay. So I know on this one, it's only 4. On the others, it's much more. So.
No, on the others, it's honestly, not really much more. It's about the same. It's pretty close.
Yeah. No, I mean, the 4,000 doesn't seem significant. Your total seems significant.
The 30,000?
That's what I was meaning. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
a significant amount of money to save. But you can't make an informed decision unless we know when they become mature, how much each year would have to come up with to take care of it, and at what size. To me, just 100,000 for 4 years, it just doesn't seem practical. So, I mean, I don't know. When I sign a lease, I only sign leases for 0% finance, 0 with a $1 buyout. So it just doesn't make sense to me to be paying more than we're earning.
When you said you had a chart that you'd done that to show kind of what it would take to catch up and be ahead of it, can we, something like that? You mentioned.
Yeah, Jim prepared that. Do you have that at your fingertips, Jim?
Yeah, I can share that right now.
Yeah, just throw it up there and show it.
Okay.
Well, Lars, all I can say to you is when you start singing love songs, making my heart go pitter patter over numbers, makes me want to take the next 3 weeks and every day and do a zero-based budget, go through the whole thing. But like a recovering alcoholic, why, I can't take one drink because once I start, I want to go and dig down deep.
Okay, I can explain this a little bit for you. What we did in an
My
attempt.
alcoholism for numbers, I need someone to explain it to me, Jim. Thank you.
Maybe I resemble that comment. Thank you. Except for I haven't given it up yet and probably won't do it for a while. Thanks. The slide that you're seeing right now is broken up into long-term and short-term leases. Now, leases is a term for financing. So replace that term for loan in your vocabulary and you'll be looking at it. So there's no returning of the equipment when it's paid off. All this is just a way of financing equipment. The most recent one that you had was a couple of weeks ago for police computers, which are on a 4-year rotation. They've determined that every 4 years they're going to replace those so they don't have equipment failures and stuff like that. So this is, we put this together pretty quickly. So there may be some things that still need some tweaking, but this should give us a pretty good idea. So on the short-term leases, this is everything that's less than 10 years. In order to pay those off, the balance outstanding right now is $1.5 million. Most of that's for equipment. Computer equipment, it's for various other little things, like we have ambulance equipment that's come up. We've got community preservation that had some leases that have come up, and this shows when they actually pay off. So we have a payoff of the community preservation in 2021. We have ambulances, has some small equipment that pays off in 2023. Information technology, remember we've had servers, we've had all kinds of things that have come up. The list is very long, and they usually come up in small increments. We might see 40,000 here, 150,000 there, but this is basically the annual amount that we pay for the equipment, annualized based on the number of years of the lease. So, for example, the police department, we show for $564,000 a year. That is a rolling amount that, based on the leases that are outstanding and when they expire, how much we would need to come up with on an annual basis to replace that equipment. So annually, this fiscal year, we've got the community preservation lease coming off. If we were to replace that equipment, it's $184,000. Then taking all those amortizations together, estimating the life of the equipment, saying that matches the life of the lease. This is an approximate amount that you'd have to come up with each year, assuming that the prices remain the same for the term. So next year it'd be $725,000, et cetera. The long-term leases, that's where you get into things like heavy equipment. We've got fire trucks. We have the energy savings programs that we did with the Maverick Center City Hall. We've got the street lighting where we replaced the LEDs. That stuff has a much longer life, and the financing for those exceeds 10 years. And this gives you the kind of same idea on those. So the 10-year total right now to pay those off, there's a balance of about $9 million, and estimated annual requirement is this column here. So that's kind of our first blush at it, and gives you kind of a thumbnail sketch on what it would take to pay cash.
And my idea is not to pay them all off right now, but as each new lease comes along, to program that we can start paying them as we go instead of paying this extra in lease finance fees.
And so this final column out here, if you add these two columns together,
Mhm.
that's the rough guesstimate of the annual cash cost to pay for what we think might be coming up. Now, this isn't based at all on the capital facilities replacement program that we had prepared a couple of years ago and we got some outside help on. So this does not address any of those hotspot items. These are just the issues that we have out currently.
But you have lists of what your directors think they're going to need over the next 10 years, correct?
That is correct.
They keep that list ongoing, so we wouldn't have to have an outside firm put anything together for us. They could just say, this is what our projected costs are going to be. These are the projected replacements. And I have no problem, doing the 1 million, 2 million, financing those, and whether or not we should, do those in a lease or a bond. But it's the smaller, the under $1 million, especially under 500,000, that I just think we're wasting money paying lease. Do we have any origination fees with those, or is it just the 1.7?
The leases, there's no origination fees on those.
Okay.
Because the bank actually takes those, it's probably more information than you need, but they combine all of their leases and they sell those off in the market. And so by doing that, we're locked into the payment basically until the end of the lease. So there's no prepayment benefit to us paying it off. And it's just, there's no origination fees. It's just whatever interest rate they give us.
Well, and to me, it just looks easier to absorb if we just start a new practice. And it's if everybody else wants to, but a new practice of just paying as we go for things under maybe say $600,000. And then we have a schedule of what we're going to need and whether it's more advantageous to lease it or to do a bond for those that are the 4 million, 2 million. But they're on a schedule as well as, okay, we're going to need every 5 years or 10 years, we're going to have to do this to cover this. But I just don't see why we can't absorb, especially the computers and some of the equipment.
I think that the things that run through all the time, like the computers and perhaps cars that we know absolutely we're going to be doing it every 4 years, that's a good way to do it. The other things I'm not so sure on. And I kind of go back to what I think was one of the mayor's points, that things have been working fine. And I think there's a little bit more of an incentive to, wear it out, do without, make it last if you don't have the money sitting there in a budget to spend. But, I understand, I think, your point, Karen, and it's a good point, and it'd be nice to pay for a car with cash. Sure. And then I think of, well, my $50,000 today, by spreading it out, really it's only $44,000 because of inflation and things that Lars is showing us. I think that, the thing that keeps ringing in my mind is we have been doing fine and we're not in trouble. I don't see this as any kind of an emergency issue. Just if we could work it in where we're paying for maybe the computers with cash instead of leasing them, because we know we're going to every 4 years buy this many computers. But then we also don't know the cost of those computers for, every year down the road either. Those things are going to change. We can budget for it, but we don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I just
Hey,
look
just
at us, we're the stewards.
one point of
Oh.
clarification to add to that, just in case anybody got the wrong idea. We do pay cash for the cars.
We do, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
It's not in the budget, but it is where we just take it out of the fund
And
balance
that-
and we pay
We
cash
find it.
every single year.
And that
Yeah.
goes
Right.
exactly to the point that we're talking about.
Yeah,
We don't have it in the budget because when we've tried to do that in the past, it operationally and policy wise became too easy of a target to take out.
oh, I personally think it should be in the budget every year. And like one of those you don't touch, as would these be, it'd just be in whoever the computer budget is. that they
That
just
would
have the
be-
165,000. With a
That'd be
2%.
great.
Yeah.
That would
and
make
then
it much easier for me managerially. That would be a 3% property tax increase. So as soon as you guys are ready to buy off on that, in addition to whatever else we need, that's the point of the discussion right there.
Well, you just have to start little, small, and plan. Cut out things
did.
that aren't as important.
That's exactly my point. We got
Yeah.
out of the rotating leases in the fleet more than 10 years ago. And we were paying roughly, I don't remember what it was at the time, somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 a year on those leases on a rotating basis, just like you're talking about, Karen.
Yeah.
At a much higher interest rate, I might add, given what the times were at the time. And we rotated out of them and preserved enough cash by scrimping and saving to put it into the general fund budget. And then as soon as the 2009 recession hit, and we had 6 years before we recovered just on sales tax again, much less the rest of it, it became an easy target to take out, and we did. Whereas if we had those, now that was good and bad, right? It was good in the sense that we at least had the money available to do that, and we could make the policy choice to delay buying new fleet vehicles, and we did. We kind of skinnied that up at a longer term cost of increased maintenance and that sort of thing. But the bad side of it, of course, was then once the policy decision was made to take that out, then we no longer were committed to that ongoing replacement, which is what your aim is. My point in telling that little parable is that that's what happens in our actual experience over time. That's what we have experienced operationally. It's not a matter of we can't come up with $30,000 a year. It's operationally been a more flexible way to purchase the computers and do it in that way. If you guys want us to pay cash for them, just make that policy decision and we'll do it.
Well, and my point was, if you remember on Tuesday, was we take money out of the fund balance as we go. So this year we've already done the computers. Say next year, we take that 164,000 out of the fund balance and start pay as you go. And then we start seeing those savings slowly. And then they just put it in the budget. Instead of paying that 4 years worth of payments, they've got the money now because they're not making the monthly payments or quarterly payments. And it works into their budget that they're spending the exact same. For 4 years, we take it out of fund balance to pay as you go. But then from that point on, they just pay as they go. And that's why I think the cars, the car's like the pump. You can put it off if you have to, but you can do that with the fund balance or having it in the general fund. You weren't always able to buy the cars. So I think we put them in the budget where they belong and maybe keep track. Do you have a schedule of how much we put in the fund balance every year? How much surplus revenue we have?
Yeah, you just saw that chart on an annual basis. That's where it went up and where it went down. And it's not because the individual spikes up and down aren't necessarily only because of a operational decision or an economy. It could also be because of a policy discussion that the council made to say, we're going to take this much money out X, Y's and put it into capital projects or whatever.
Yeah. But do we know how much? I would like to see a schedule of how much we've been putting in from our surplus revenue every year into the fund balance to get it to where it is today.
Yeah, it was just right on that chart that we showed you.
Well, but that's the up and down. That doesn't tell us exactly what was put in. That gives us the difference between what was put in and what was taken out. I want to see how much went in every time. Pardon?
Maybe I'm not understanding your question. That's a net amount for sure.
Yeah.
What you're saying, I guess, is you want to see all the
surplus
ups and downs within that change. That is the surplus. It's either the actual surplus or the actual decrease.
Yeah. So, but we have a revenue surplus every year that goes into that fund balance.
Yeah.
We transferred at the end, right?
Right.
Okay. That's all I want to see. Not how much we took out, just how much our revenue surplus was that we put in.
Okay.
I know that you'll say, hey, we're going to put $4 million in. Let's buy the cars this year. So now we only put $3 million in. I just want to see what that revenue surplus is in our regular general fund that we put into the fund balance.
Okay.
Because
I
then you're
understand.
making a better educated decision of, oh, we usually have 600,000. We can absorb this because we're going to put that much in, and we can absorb doing this program of pay as you go.
Yeah, I can tell you that number too. It's between $1 million and $1.5 million on average, depending on, whether the economy spiked up or down, but it's roughly in
Yeah.
that area.
Okay. And that's another thing, just to understand when and where and how this budget or this fund grows, I think is another way of helping us make a more informed decision about this.
I think maybe a couple of points of clarification. One, I think I will slightly disagree with Wayne. The cars are in our budget.
Exactly. I'm
We
not
don't-
the one that said they weren't in the budget, Mayor.
Okay.
They end up in the budget, whether it's at the beginning of the budget year or sometime during the budget year, they're
The
in it.
budget
Yes.
is anything that we authorize to spend.
Right.
The budget is not the one we approve at the start. It always changes some.
Correct. Yes, exactly.
But everything, in fact, by law, has to be included in there. The second thing is the issue on financing or not is not a right or wrong question.
Right.
It's a preference.
Exactly.
And
And probably the
Doesn't
crux
work.
of that discussion, at least from a staff recommendation standpoint, not necessarily a policy decision standpoint, but from a staff recommendation standpoint, it's our estimate of, going back to what Lars was talking about, is the interest rate low enough to be worth that flexibility from our standpoint to recommend it, or is it too high from an opportunity cost standpoint that we would rather have that extra cash and not pay it in debt? That's basically the crux of why you get that recommendation from us one way or the other.
yeah, but you see, if we were to change it, it wouldn't be a wrong answer. It would be a
No.
different answer.
Correct.
And so
Yes, we agree.
whichever way we go is still right. It's still not a problem. It's just a matter of financial preference. And that can vary based upon the amount and the purpose. And in fact, we use just about all of those. We use some direct payments up front. We use some leases, and we use some bonding.
But say that we're facing a 10% interest rate, then staff's recommendation, I assume, would be, let's not finance this. Let's just figure out a way to pay for it. And we're going to have to get money from this source or that source.
Yeah, except in some sort of extenuating circumstance, absolutely, I would agree with that. I can't see us ever coming and recommending something like that to you, unless we just were forced to.
Right. I mean, there's just no other way or
Right.
whatever. There was a time when interest rates were very high back in the.
Well, there are a lot
Yeah.
of factors that enter into that discussion. At what point does the interest rate change the decision? It's kind of like Jim was talking about the opportunity cost. When interest rates are really low, if you're going to have to borrow anyway at some point, it's better to do it when interest rates are low while the opportunity is there. And I remember that specifically during the recession, by the way, it was 2008, Wayne, September, when the legislature met to start the first major cuts. The economists didn't call it that yet, just because we were in it and the money was gone. Why? Those of us who had spent money knew it was there. When we issued the bond for Utah County roads, the cost went from $1.3 billion down to 800,000. Now, a lot of that was interest, but some of it was just businesses were afraid, and so they cut their margins too. Saved the state $500 million on that one project. So I highlight that because there are times when you do want to borrow. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of major road projects, so it doesn't impact us. But that'll forever stick in my mind. That was a lot of money. Bars, because it was numbers, it was carved on my heart. Now, we are at 10:30. We're going to go till noon. Usually after the financial portion, we kind of take a little break. We probably ought to do that as well electronically for about 10 minutes. Is this a good time?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And when we come back, then we'll see what issues we want to discuss. I have two, one simple and one complex. That's all I have today from me. But any council member is able to bring up anything they want, including Mr. Pyle. You can bring up issues too. Or you can listen, just if you want.
Sounds great.
So 10:45, Mayor?
Okay, 10:45.
May I just want you guys know I'm gonna be back a couple of minutes late or something. That'd be okay with you guys?
Okay,
All right.
we'll just move
Yeah.
forward. We'll
Okay.
try and catch you up. Now, I'm going to leave my computer connected.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I suggest that the rest of you do as well. If you want to shut your video and audio down, that's okay. That's what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Go.
Well, I can see that 10:45 is not going to be 10:45.
It's not 10:45 yet.
Yeah,
So I
that's-
missed who is present in the meeting besides the city council. Did you read that off, Mayor?
Who's in here? Well, we have Nicole Cottle and then we do have the one member, and it's not who's doing it right now. There were a couple of people assigned to be available for any technical difficulties.
Mayor, this is Ken
And
Cushing.
they're,
I'm
Yeah, I saw-
here during this
Ken.
until lunch. I'm the one that's here.
yeah.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, I just didn't hear who was here for staff, and I didn't know if Nicole needed that for the minutes.
Okay, let's see. Tom said he'd be a few minutes late, and Wayne is a few minutes late. Of course, wait a second. No, it's 10:45. He usually comes in a few seconds before the meeting start. So. Well, council, while Wayne's coming, how do you want this to proceed? I mentioned I have two items, just so you know what they are. One, the simple one is the Veterans Memorial. I have just a few things to show you on it. The intent, I've raised $300,000. The intent is to spend this spring and have a groundbreaking no later than the end of May. The other issue that I have is what I call a vision for our city. What do we want it to be like 25 years from now, which could be a fairly long discussion. And I've got a few slides to cover that. Ought to be an interesting discussion. And then anything any of you want to bring up? Do any of you have a list or?
My only list, Mayor, would be to tick through last year's minutes, and some of those things we've accomplished, some things I think we were distracted by this year being so much different that I don't know that they were done. And some things I might have just missed the report on them, but I don't think that would take very long to tick through either.
No,
Except
Wayne,
for-
in fact, Wayne, I think has that. I saw recently a document.
We got an email with it.
Yeah. So.
How long ago was that?
Oh, hang on. I have it pulled up on my other iPad. Just a second, I'll tell you. It was January 7th, and the email was from Wayne. January 7th. And there's 4 bullet points at the bottom. And that's how he goes through them.
Okay, I've got that. Let me
Okay,
do that. Thanks.
you're welcome.
I've got it as well. So from the sounds of things, if no one objects, we'll take that from last year kind of as a follow-up and then just go from there and see what any of you individually want to bring up. Is that okay?
It's fine with me.
Hearing no objections, then do all of you have that document, or Wayne or Nicole, could one of you bring that up?
I've got it, Mayor. I can share the screen. You talking about the year-end, the strategic plan report?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
starts out with the
Strategic plan
placemaking.
Q2 ends
current year 2020 report.
Yes, okay. Let me see if I can do this.
I don't think
are
we
you
need to
guys-
read them, just talk about maybe what's going on with them.
Right, yeah, I'll just answer any questions you have about them. Are you guys seeing it now?
I have it, oh, not on the screen, just on my iPad.
Oh, hold on. I thought I shared the screen. I probably didn't do it right. There we go.
Everybody's
Oh,
going
I
to be
see.
really good at Zoom by the end of this year.
Okay, there we go. Should see it now. Is it up?
Yes, it is. It's not
Okay.
full screen, but it's up.
Oh, okay. I can maybe make it a little bigger if that helps.
Somehow Jim had his full screen, but I don't know what he did.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But I
well,
have it. We
here.
have it on our iPads. There you
Okay.
go.
So yeah, I mean, I won't read through it. If you all have any questions on it or anything specific that you'd like to have more discussion on, we certainly can do that.
So what are we trying to do with the drone course? Is that for our employees to?
I'm sorry, which
well,
one are you looking at?
The drone course?
Oh, that was just one of the interns placemaking ideas. And the idea was that it would be a drone course for like having races, like air races.
Oh, so involving the citizens or whoever has drones and
Right.
wants to play.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And was he not able to get the FAA to even talk to him?
I think that would have been part of the issue. I'm not even sure he got that far, frankly, because
Oh,
he had
okay.
a couple. He had another. The intern that I'm remembering had that one. Is also the one that the dinosaur dig was his main project, and that one actually will be ready and finished and available at the beginning of March.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, as it was going up, I was trying to figure out what it was.
Right. It's actually a great idea. He didn't get very far with it. Maybe somebody else will pick it up in the future from an intern standpoint, or we could just assign it. But yeah, all the interns in this past summer took on a couple of projects each, and some of them were realistic, and I didn't want to discourage them. I said, hey, yeah, look, the whole point of this is to get us some placemaking facets in the city and for you to learn project management. So it's better to shoot for the moon or shoot for the stars and hit the moon than to fall on your face, right? So I said, yeah, go ahead and at least concentrate on getting the one done. And if you can get more done and you want to, do that as well.
So would it create any sense of intrigue if we put dinosaur dig coming soon on that fence? Because if anybody's like me, we've been watching things happen, but we have no clue what's going on.
Idea what it is.
Yeah. So I just tried to
Yeah.
kind of get people excited, get them to know instead of just, no
Yeah, sure.
signing.
Yeah, that'd be easy to do. We just
that might.
get Nancy's people to put that together.
Yeah, just something simple.
Well, I can't seem to do this a good way that's easily manipulable. So I'll just leave it this way. I'll scroll up and down depending on what you guys have a question about.
So the land acquisitions are the second thing on there. Is that pretty much exactly how you've got it on here?
Yes, there's
Okay.
an attached memo that I'm not showing here, but it is attached to your email. You can go back and take a look at that. I would say overall, we've had pretty good success. There was one area we had no success in whatsoever, and that was we did have contact with the church, trying to see if they'd be willing to part with some of their ground in the southwest quadrant, in stake centers, that sort of thing, and they did not want to do that.
So they're keeping their fields? Okay.
Yeah, they're keeping all their land. There's another one which I would qualify as failed but hopeful. And by failed, I'm being a little hard on it, but we're talking about those properties out there like the Condi property where the owner he says he's amenable, but we just can't get him to ink a deal. So
okay.
we'll continue our efforts there and see if we can bring it to fruition. But so far, we just haven't been able to close the deal.
And then the one in the eastern part of the city, it's just a no-go. They want too much for it.
Is that the one over in Chesterfield, just off Parkway
Yeah.
you're talking about? Yes.
That's the only one I kind of saw no hope.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, they just wanted too much money. Now, speaking of that, and I'm trying to remember it's not even on this list because it wasn't part of the discussion last year, but we have a property that adjoins the what used to be the Jordan River project, the whatever we called it, with the developer that failed over there. It's right just north of the heating, Jones Heating Company, and right next to that other farm we bought. They're just kind of southwest of the cultural center.
Is that Jones property that's on the agenda?
Yeah. Yes. It's just north of the Jones property. And so we've had an opportunity to buy that at around, well, it's just less than $500,000. I think it's really desirable for accumulating property over there adjacent to that parcel. Could be helpful to the Veterans Hall, Cultural Center, park that we develop, all of that. It's a little bit pricey in that it's almost $500,000 and we would have to take it out of the fund balance to buy it. But I thought you guys would want to consider that for sure. And frankly, given all the criteria by which we're sort of considering these proposals in the past, we think it's one we should recommend to you. So that'll be coming your way here pretty quick.
I think it's on the study agenda this next week.
Yeah, it's coming right up.
And that's our purchase of that property is coming up?
It would be our purchase, yeah.
Okay. So can we move on to the campaign finance then?
Whatever you guys want to do.
Sure.
I'm sorry, what did you say, Karen?
Well, nobody else seemed to have questions about park and land acquisition. So I was just wondering if we should move on to the campaign finance. That's the next one that was on the little blurbs at the bottom, the packets. I think this is one Steve Bueller had questions on.
It was just because we just I wanted a kind of a survey of other cities. Looks like they're all over the place.
Which wasn't a real surprise because there's a lot of vagueness and shortness to the state statute, I think.
The city just makes its own campaign rules. It's not a state legislated thing. It's not a county. It's just city by city.
No, I mean, there is state statute that applies. It just leaves a lot of, like I said, vagueness to it. So that leaves open the ability to interpret within the individual electoral bodies, whether that's a county or city or whatever.
Are there state limits on donations or contributions? Like, could Ascent Construction say, give me $50,000 to run a campaign?
Yeah.
Like,
nope.
Right. So it's a good question. I'm actually not expert in that field. It'd be best if we answered or asked Nicole Kamak that one. She kind of is the expert. But Nicole Cottle, who is with us, may actually know the answer to that. Do you know, Nicole?
Yeah, actually in Utah, the campaign finance rules are pretty broad, and there's a lot of discretion there. There are some limits, and I'm happy to provide those. They come in category, so we could work up a memo for you that shows how those categories work. But they're very broad, and there are lots of methodologies by which both individuals, companies, and otherwise can provide campaign funding to all levels of government. So Utah is very liberal that way. The state does set forth some limits, but they're very liberal and categorical. So we can provide you a workup of how that works. Like a matrix would probably be easiest because there are a lot of different categories.
Are there specific rules about what you do with your leftover money as far as the state is concerned, or is that something we would have to write in ourselves?
There are rules with regards to leftover money. Of course, we're not preempted as a city from adding some things to our own scenario there if the council would desire that, but the rules are at the state level right now, and they're pretty liberal. So there are a lot of things you can do with those funds, but right now it's governed by the state.
So the county they require a statement of what you've done with those funds every 3 months, even when it's not an election year. And then they also only allow the funds raised for a county race to be spent on county races. So they keep track of that money and audit it and make sure it's going to what they allow. So could we do that as well as a city?
And I think state law would allow you to contribute it to other candidates, or I'm not sure if you kept it, if you call it income and pay taxes on it, or.
For the county, they say you can't take it for personal use. And you have to file the report, and you can only donate it to another county race or spend it on another county race. That's the only one I really had time to check into.
I appreciate the survey and the information here. Now that it is an election year, and this is why I brought it up last year, so I'm hesitant to make any changes in an election year lest it looks self-serving. But I would make one suggestion, and that is our packet that we give to candidates include these things like what's required or prohibited by state law, that you can't receive more than this much money from whatever this source, if it's a PAC, if it's an individual, if it's your own funds, or however it is. So that's included, and whatever is required as far as reporting or use of money that's left over. I think those things, without us making any changes, those things are already defined, but the information that we give candidates. Going beyond that, looking to the future, maybe not changes this year because it is an election year. When we get down to the summary at the end and it says, well, about these anonymous contributions, I would be fine with saying we don't allow anonymous contributions. I mean, I think the anonymous contributions up to $50, but if we're at, okay, well, I got, 1,000 anonymous $49 contributions, that's a lot of money, $49,000 that we're not really accounting for where it came from.
Well, and I think if we print out the state statutes, I mean, like within the last 3 or 4 years, they've added that you can now pay for daycare with campaign funds, where that wasn't allowed before the legislature changed that. So I think it'd be helpful to add the state requirements onto the campaign.
So who's daycare? So like if I have to have a babysitter so I can go knock doors, or my campaign manager has to have a babysitter to do her work, or
for her children, and that I haven't looked into as to if your campaign helpers can hire the babysitter for their children. But I just remember when it happened, I just didn't read the full rules.
And even if it's just providing a copy of the relevant statutes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention.
I've run a few times and I haven't ever looked at the state statutes. I just figure my campaigns are so quiet and low budget that was far away from running afoul of anything. I do try to get all my reports in, which brings us to the question, what if somebody doesn't file a report? We always have the question, well, if they don't file it afterwards, there isn't anything we can do about it, because the only thing we probably could do about it is take them off the ballot. And that's a timing question, because we have to know when they're in violation and if we have any opportunity to cure the violation, and how soon can we notify the county that they have to be taken off the ballot and so forth. I guess we could deal with it by an ordinance that says if some other penalty rather than taking off the ballot. But I think that because it is an election year, other than providing more information, I wouldn't want to deal with any substantive changes until next year.
And this is not on financing, but I think we need to emphasize too the removal of campaign signs after the campaign. I'm getting tired of seeing them now. Now that everybody's been sworn in, it's probably time to move them.
But we don't know if those signs are up for the next time, right? They could just be, I better leave this sign up because I'm running again in 4 years, whether I won or not.
When I first started this, I was given a time, I think 48 hours after the polls closed, I had to have all my signs down. And Sherry really enforced that. I don't know if we have that same requirement now or not.
I don't know either, Don. I was being a little facetious. I hate having the signs up. I spend hours on election night taking down signs because I don't like having them up in the first place.
I agree with you.
And maybe our cleanup crew can gather up signs as they go around the city cleaning things up. If they stopped and had light bar on their truck and pulled down all the campaign signs that seem to be old or hanging by one corner and twisting in the wind.
Yeah, I know. And I had some of mine picked up by city workers on previous campaigns. And so it made me more cautious about where I put them too. And I don't see that happening anymore.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with what's been said in terms of providing some basic guidance regarding the filings and the finance, and then referencing the original statutes. I mean, it's still providing the basic information, I think, is great on our end, and every candidate should be doing their due diligence to research the details on all of that as well. And while we're on that, I did want to bring up too that Nicole Kamak did an awesome job a little while ago. She shared with us by the council's request some bullet points about proper placement and improper placement of campaign signage, and also link that back to the statutes. And so that may be another page we want to include in that package too.
Yeah, and I think that there has been something in there about your signs, how big they can be and so forth. But I think all of the information that we have ought to be provided to everybody that signs up to run. And then as far as do we want to make some changes to the reporting, to what's required, to any penalties for violation, all of that stuff, I would say for a discussion item to be brought up at the first of the year for whoever's in office then to discuss.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. So, meeting disruption memo?
Well, we passed an ordinance, right?
No, we did not pass an ordinance. Right. We drafted one that could be considered. Frankly, from a staff standpoint, it'd be pretty hard to enforce, and we're not sure we do recommend it, but we did prepare it at your request. So yeah, if the council would like to do anything with that further, we're open to your direction, of course.
So is the thought, Wayne, that it's just, I mean, it's subject to too much interpretation, what's a disruption, what's not, and we're going to run afoul of content-based enforcement, which would be contrary to the First Amendment, or?
Yeah, basically. I mean, that's the legal concern. From my standpoint, I'm not quite as there as they are, but I see the point. And in some cases, it should seem pretty easy to define. You're shouting over people, you're yelling obscenities, whatever. That seems like fairly obvious means or reason to eject somebody from a meeting, but they probably wouldn't agree, obviously. And then down from that standard, where is the balancing line, and what do we open ourselves up to? I think the other position the legal department is taking is that in that difficult of a position where somebody's obviously disrupting the meeting, you probably already have the power to eject them from the meeting. So why define further or add an ordinance to it? But again, that's just our thought from a staff standpoint. If the council wants us to do something further with that, we're fine to do that.
It's been a while, but we did talk about what would happen and how he would leave and who takes control and things like that. Was that just kind of communication to us, or was that I don't recall that being a policy discussion so much as
almost more like a training exercise, right?
Right. Right.
I think that's correct by my memory. I'd have to go back though.
And we do have this ordinance that was attached that's, I guess, is in place. We're just questioning whether we add another section about no person addressing the council will engage in slanderous, offensive, inflammatory, irrational. Well, irrational, I don't know that we could include that because someone's rational is not somebody else's rational.
Right.
Or personal.
So you're seeing the crux of it. That's correct. So we do have the ordinance. Any recommended change that we would draft really basically consists of that. Although we could go back and again and look at other criteria if the council wants us to as well.
I think that, I see the pitfalls in including this. I think it's hard to stay away from content-based. If it's dangerous, I think we already have the ability to stand up and leave, right? Nobody votes and passes something that's not us. So if we're feeling threatened, we stand up, leave, adjourn the meeting, whatever. We probably ought to include that in our annual training. As things in society don't seem to be getting calmer and calmer, they seem to be going the other direction. People need to scream louder to be heard.
Yeah, we could do that.
So we are at the campaign finance rules.
No, we're on the meeting disruption memo, the next one over, Tom.
Okay.
Are you just coming back in, Tom?
Yes. Yeah.
So on the campaign finance, I think that we have decided not to make any changes this year, but just to provide more or all of the information that is available.
Okay.
One question on that. Was there a mention of anonymity in regards to donations? Did I hear somebody bring that up? Did we come to a decision on that?
Well, it was in the memo that to avoid, these fundraiser, hey, I got a bunch of money at a fundraiser, that we could eliminate anonymous contributions. But my position, Jake, is let's not make any substantive changes this year, but review it again the first of next year when it's not an election year. I just don't want anything looking like we're changing the rules to benefit us in an election year.
Correct. No, I can see that as well. Okay, thanks.
Good point.
Well, and if there's a question, I think Nicole could look it up, but I thought there was anything over $10, you had to list a name from what Sherry has given us in the past and Nicole's packets. So maybe make a definite decision of what the state says there and put it in. Not us change it, just put what state law is.
Yeah, and the memo references that they're allowed up to $50.
Oh, okay.
Contributions are allowed up to $50. And my worry is that, well, we could just, they were all anonymous. They were all under $50, and I'm not telling you where anything came from because I don't know, but I actually had
Right.
$50,000 to run my campaign. I think there's a question of honesty with such a statement, which could probably only be dealt with by saying no anonymous contributions. But I don't want to go there this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. So are we going to change anything on the meetings then? Meeting disruption, or just leave it as is?
I think we would leave it and then just include what to do if things get dicey in as part of our annual training that Eric's doing with the open meetings, or somewhere in there where it fits.
Well, and I think so that there's no confusion, we just have 1 or 2 a year actual drills to make sure everybody's in accordance with, everybody stands up, walks this direction. You do not gather your stuff. You don't, just whatever seems prudent from the security standpoint and the legal standpoint.
I think a drill's a fun idea, as long as it's a scheduled drill. I don't want an unannounced pretend drill where I might not react appropriately.
I agree, but I think if you've run through it a couple times, it's better in your brain exactly what's expected.
Sure.
So
that's why we ran monthly fire drills in the schools.
Of course, right now, where we're not meeting, what do we drill? Just turn off my iPad and then I'm safe? Or I think we need to wait for all that till we're back in person.
Right. I agree. So do we have a legal issue if somebody's getting combative on Zoom to turn them off? Or do we have the First Amendment legal problems there?
I don't think we do have a problem, but I can do some further research for that.
Okay.
Okay, from that discussion then on our council meetings, one, it is the responsibility of the chair to control the meeting. And if a person becomes disruptive, they are within their right to turn off the microphone or have them escorted out if they are disruptive to the meeting, generally speaking. And I think that's a reasonable type of bar, if you will, or standard to raise. And then the other is that we have some training on emergency situations. I don't expect it here in West Valley City, certainly at the Capitol more likely, but if there was a group to come in and try and be disruptive, that we have a security emergency procedure and we could handle that in a closed session, I believe. Isn't that right, Mr. Pyle?
Yes, sir.
And I think we would not want to do that except discuss it and actually do it in a closed session, which is pretty straightforward, How do we get out and where do we go? Do we wait for police escort? A few things like that. We just, clarify some of those. But let's do that one in a closed session. Everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Did that cover everything? Any additions to that?
Well, I just have one comment.
Yeah.
Our citizens have been really good at following the rules, but watching all the people jumping jurisdictions and living other places in the state and still coming and bombing not bombing, but verbally attacking us over something, we need to just be prepared for that. Our citizens are good, but not all players are good outside of the city.
Yeah, I agree with that. I watched that with Congressman Chris Stewart. They were professional agitators who came and disrupted the meeting.
Yep. Things are changing quickly.
Yes. Okay. Did we get through all the first 14?
No, we're just doing those 3 little bullet points at the bottom. And now I think it would be smart to go to the strategic plan one. That's number 1 is Veterans Hall Project.
Okay.
And that's what Wayne has pulled up is all of
If
those.
it's okay, I want to hold the Veterans Project to the end of that because I want to pull up a different item on the screen. And it's, just easier. So if it's okay, we'll start with number 2 and just run through these. Number 2, let's see, anything that we need to maintain on this, or do we feel comfortable with where we are and it can be taken off? For the future.
I think that the finances have just killed the project for now, but I don't want it to necessarily be forgotten. I don't think it needs to be, I mean, I don't know how it's kept in abeyance for today.
So thinking really, really far out of the box, but instead of going in and buying a house, well, it probably wouldn't work. I was just thinking if we could find a house that's for sale, make an agreement with the owner that we come and upgrade it, and we take that profit money out of the sell price and just use somebody else's house, but put upgrade it and then sell it and take those profits and just show people in the neighborhood what the difference is in your house if you have it at this level or if you've upgraded and then it's at this level. But that might be way too hard.
Well, that almost sounds like we're going into the business of flipping houses.
Yeah, and that doesn't sound even somewhat sensible. So just ignore all of that.
Well, here I think the market right now is increased very much in the real estate market for the housing. So what we can do is maybe you can work with the owner of the house and maybe you can jump in and fix the house for them and see the budgets they have, how much they have they can afford. Maybe we can make a contribution here and there and then make that area look nice and how it looks nice and not the area look nice. Instead of buying a house for right now, it's so expensive for now. That's $150,000. We're going to be over $300,000 and above, and that's a little bit too much for us. So maybe the owner.
Maybe on this one, with the change in the price of houses and that, Tom, is to maybe leave this on here and say, define how we will handle these projects in the future as the cost of homes exceeds the budget that we have to successfully participate. What other options are there for using funds to improve neighborhoods, specific houses? Should we change to a whole new program? Small loans for homes or grants of a few $1,000s to upgrade things on multiple homes in a neighborhood or something. Maybe we send that back to our staff to come up with a way that we could use these funds to make a difference in our neighborhoods. If we can with buying a home, even a rundown home, in bad shape is $300,000 now.
And Mayor, I think that's a good idea. And maybe this morphs over or becomes an extension of the My Hometown project.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
expansion of that.
Ooh, excellent. Yeah, if they could look and see what we could do in conjunction with the My Hometown project, yes.
But not be limited necessarily to that neighborhood, but an expansion.
A different one.
We also, we maybe make a commitment to have let the owners borrow money from us, maybe $50,000, the cap we have, and zero interest for them. And the work My Hometown, that's what maybe against solve the problem.
Well, before we put a dollar amount on that, would it be better to help many people, like in a neighborhood, 20 people with small amounts, or large amounts for 3 people?
That's what we're going to be.
Yeah, I think.
So let's let our staff kind of come back with a proposal there. But I think generally I would prefer to say, how do you help more people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and let's see, Nicole, maybe I think you're going to make notes of all these, but if you'll follow up on that one, make sure you have.
We're both making notes, Mayor. We're taking down thoughts as well as having the whole recording. So yeah, we got it.
Well, we had a lot of talking there, but I think where we ended up was, how can the staff come back with recommendations that involve neighborhoods similar to, maybe including My Hometown, and helping more people to make a difference in that neighborhood.
Yep, got it.
Okay. Anything else there? Number 3, sustainability. Oh, sitting there trying to move the one on my computer, and it doesn't move.
Wayne's doesn't.
I also have it on my iPad. Okay, sustainability efforts. Generally speaking, I would like this one to continue because it will be constantly changing. I know there's work that's been done, but I think City Hall, Utah Cultural Celebration Center infrastructure upgrades to begin in early 2021. So some of these are not done yet. Is that correct?
Yes, it's an ongoing process, Mayor. We plan to always be in the middle of some projects. Some are done, some are not done, some are more conceptual and planning.
So do we need to leave this on our list? Because this has kind of become almost a policy, if you will.
Right.
So do we need to have it on our strategic plan list?
I would say only if you have some different or new projects you want to direct us down the path of, or if there's ones that are existing on here you just feel are important enough that you want to see a report on it again throughout the year in the strategic plan process itself.
Yeah. I think for one thing, generally speaking, it's clear that the council supports these efforts and there's a plan in place to continue doing that. That's really what we wanted, I think.
Yep.
Although the EV stations, have we done those?
We have some new ones in the city. We have done a few. There are others that have been done by developers, and we're still trying to get more. Like, for example, I don't think we still have the grant applied ones installed. That has been an excruciating process, but we're still working it. We do have some up in the new parking structure, and I think we have a couple of new ones either already installed or on the way out at the fitness center, for example. So yeah, it's a continuing process as well.
There's some over in the Granger medical parking area too.
Oh yeah, right. Yes, I'd forgotten those.
Leave it on, take it off.
I have something I'd like to say, Mayor, about sustainability. I think that we've been making some great progress, and these are all wonderful things that we're doing. And I'd like to see us do more and take this up a notch. And I think that our residents want this as well. And we passed that resolution at the end of 2019 to reach a goal of net zero emissions. And we're no longer in that consortium of cities working with Rocky Mountain Power, but that doesn't take away that goal that we unanimously passed. And I think there's more that we can do, especially if we had a staff member dedicated to this who was trained and passionate about it. Wayne, if you wouldn't mind not sharing your screen, and I'll share
Sure.
some of my thoughts.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you. Let's see. So I've been thinking, I've brought this up many times before, but I still believe in it, that we need a trained, experienced specialist who could help us. When John and Wayne report on these things, it's really great news. And they focus a lot on the financial benefits, but I'm more concerned about the environmental benefits. And I think that our residents are as well. We're concerned about air quality and the future of our environment. And it's not always about how much money we're going to be saving, but more about the impact it will have on the environment. And someone who's experienced and trained with this focus could really help us. A lot of the things we've been doing have been focusing on what we do with our own city-owned properties, but what can we be doing more to help residents and business owners in our city to help reach these goals?
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Lars. I think about this. If we do this, we're talking about a level of expertise and that I don't think any of us probably have, and kind of a standalone thing. Maybe it would be better to contract with a company that consults and has that expertise and has 4, 5, 10, 100 people that they know what they're doing, and they could give us some advice and enter into a consulting contract rather than just hiring somebody and saying, okay, you're the burr under the saddle of every department. Because I think that would be a difficult position to be in the first place, and then having to go through many channels to make any kind of real change. Where if the consultant, they have their work defined and come back and give us a recommendation, and whether we accept it in whole or any percentage of it or department by department or whatever, it might be more efficient, and it might also yield better results.
Okay, here I agree with Lars for one point about not only city properties, but also we have to bring it kind of broader sense to the citizen in this city. And I agree with him that point about lighting. We need to have more light in the city. Because some is out there is very blurred. It's hard for people to see at night, and it caused some people they came home from work too late and fell off. One of the ladies, she did. So I don't know how big that project gonna be, but we need to bring this one kind of broader sense to the citizens in this cities, to not only the USDC lighting, but or Maverick Center's lighting, but go to the whole city and see which one is out and which one we have to replace the light bulb.
Well, I think we need to be a little careful here. There are things that the city can do. We've focused, I think, on our buildings because we have total control of that. There are a few things that we can do on, maybe our building codes, landscape codes. But air quality, there's not a lot we can do. Our efforts, I think, would be better focused on working with county and state officials who actually have funds available to do some of those things. Whereas the city, the amount of funds we can put to it and have an impact are pretty minimal. And if it doesn't have a cost savings return, that's pretty hard when we don't have enough people in our police department, or, we need a new fire engine and stuff. So the priorities need to be there, but I think we do things to support broader help, because this environmental issue of air and water and everything else has to be addressed on a broader level than just here at the city. I think we continue with the things that we're doing, and I like that we're making progress, but I don't know that we're going to be able to do a whole lot for, placing requirements on citizens or anything like that. Maybe I'm missing the boat there. I see that working on a state level or a whole valley-wide level at least, but I don't see it working very well on an individual city basis, especially since most of the items are expensive.
I agree with Lars that I think we need somebody either on staff or consulting with us that is specifically assigned to sustainability. So many times we're doing it now, so we'll just keep doing it. But then it kind of falls into it's worked in the past, we'll keep it working, but it not going forward and doing more sustainability or better sustainability. So I think if we have a specialist or a consultant that will keep that before us, it'll help.
So are you feeling that the work that the city's doing right now and the things we've done are insufficient? That's the message
not insufficient.
Huh?
They go as far as they can go right now, but we don't have an expert to tell us. One of the reasons that the Maverick Center put in so much was that there was a consultant there that led us through the process. So I think we need somebody like that on a full-time looking at everything basis, not just one project, so that it becomes more of an ethic in the city, more of just an automatic thing that we look for sustainability. And that only comes when you keep it in front of our face all the time.
Well, here.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say, I agree with Lars, and I equate this to the new legislative person we just hired. So we're taking some of our legislative monies that we've been paying, and we're putting it towards that salary. And I think we could do the same thing here. I think instead of having Lewis Young recommend all these and be our project manager, I think we take those funds, bring it in-house, hire someone that looks at everything all the time, can be a resource for builders, can be a resource for our citizens. I think we're better served to have some on staff that understands it, and we take those monies that we've been paying someone else to come up with the plans and the project manager and have this person do all that. I think we've got the funding there if we just redirect it. And yes, it'll be a little bit more, but so is the legislator guy. So I think it's something that the city needs.
Here, you're talking about Maverick Center, and the lighting right there is about trying to protect our property and protect our customer and also environmental matter. Okay, how about the citizen in this city? It's a short story I want to share with you. The lady, she came home from work late at night. She tripped the sidewalk, fell up, and she broke 2 arms. Cost her for $15,000 to replace that. And who paid that money? She had to pay that. And she very, very humble person, very modest person, and she had to spend $15,000 to do that, to pay that medical bill. And I talked to the city, and the city, they came out, they pumped the cement and to make the level. But the problem, the lighting too. So who will be responsible? She, but she didn't sue the property owner. So we try to protect our property here, Mavis Center, protect our clients here, the customers, environmental matter, and how about the citizen? It's something like that. I know going to be a big project for us, but I think it's people, they have question for that. Who protect me? I spent for $15,000 for pay my medical bill because I couldn't see. The lighting was so bad. And she very modest person. Probably drew all the banking from her bank account, all the accounts she has, so have to pay that money. So I think about it. But the thing is, I know it's going to be a big project, but it's going to take time there and try to help our citizens in this city. That's recently.
Okay, well, at this point, I would say it's pretty clear that a majority of the council wants to have a full-time environmentalist. Now, I disagree with that, but I will support it because of the desire of the council. I have not had anyone really call me with complaints about these issues. I've not, when I went door to door, there were a few, but very few, but there were literally all kinds of people who are concerned about our police department, about the safety of neighborhoods, parking. And so if we're going to hire more people, that's where I want to focus. But I will, of course, heed to the majority of the council.
Mayor, if I can just ask a clarifying question, I did not hear a majority of the people so far wanting that position. I heard Lars, Don, and Karen, with Tom, at least as I understood it, addressing a different subject. Was there somebody else in there that I missed?
I'm open to the mention of consulting a role or position. I'm not sure that it needs to be full-time, at least. I mean, maybe it would be nice to have a consultant come in with a very targeted task for an assessment or something like that, which based on the results of that assessment, I might decide or I might be in favor of continuing that relationship full-time. I think that's where I'm at on the issue.
To that, or adding to that comment, I do have a possible compromise that might just get us the further step down the road there. So in our ongoing consultant relationship with Lewis Young, they themselves have come back a number of times proposing, hey, the software that you guys are using doesn't really work very well from a measuring impact standpoint, other than financial, like Lars mentioned. We would make some suggestions in that realm, both in terms of measuring and effort and focus, that sort of thing. So they have those discussions with us anyway along that line. As I look down Lars's list of bullet points between what John Rock does and between what they do, most of these are covered or could be covered with some additional tweaking with them. Like, for example, achieving net zero emissions. What would it take to do that? Or what's the biggest environmental impact, not just including financial? So that's probably, if not possible from 100% goal of getting where we would just have a person that's all they did all the time, it would be moving along that path, and it would be closer to that. And that's really, frankly, again, that's stuff they're already suggesting of their own accord in those work and effort, or that work, and in those efforts with John.
So Wayne, how much do we pay them a year? I mean, would we be able
I don't
to
remember
hire
off
someone?
the top of my head. I'd have to go look that number up, Karen.
Okay. I mean, that's another, to make an informed decision, we would have to have that information to see if cost effectively it would be effective to have an employee there all the time that could answer residents' complaints or concerns or help guide them to be more sufficient with their energy and different things like that. That's where I see the plus is citizens can just call. Lewis Young is not like a phone call away. They're not at the building every day. So, and then I think we really need to look at the building codes that Lars has on here. I believe that we can maybe tweak some ordinances to help us get better water use, better efficiency. One idea I had that I saw works really well in Durham, North Carolina, is they send 4 LED light bulbs or 2, I can't remember really the amount, every year to every citizen. So that puts those, our citizens on a more efficient energy use. And 2 a year doesn't seem like a lot, but where they last so long, after a few years, all the lights in your house are now LED, and we're saving energy, and the cost goes down to the resident for their monthly electric bill, and we have less emissions.
Wayne, even if we designated John, who's working with Lewis Young right now, as a contact, if a resident called in, they could go or they could talk directly to John and he could give them the answer. And it wouldn't be any increase right now. I think we need to look at it and see just what the costs are both ways and go from there.
That's a interesting suggestion. In fact, John really pretty much is the guy that gets directed that way anyway right now. He's just not marketed as such. So we could do that.
I think someone to answer calls, it's a lonely job if nobody calls. And, but that I understand that the logic isn't 100% there because nobody's calling because we don't have a person because they don't know they can call. And so, but I just don't know how useful that would be, how much improvement we can really make. I see that as a whole different question than reviewing the codes, and maybe we add something to, you have to have an electric charging station, or you have to have another tree or whatever it is, which again, maybe doesn't need somebody committed to that full time as at a staff level. And maybe a consultant, I don't know, I might be wrong. Maybe the consultant's answer is, wow, this is something you guys need to have a department for so that you can really do the best that you can. I just, I don't know. And I would proceed cautiously. I think that our influence isn't great. It's kind of like, with our buildings, we can pass an ordinance saying that every house will be built a certain way and beautiful and energy efficient, and it doesn't affect 99% of the houses in our city because they're already here.
For example, I've got an older part of my house that if I were to put LED lights in the light fixtures I have there, I'd have to rewire the whole system because the LEDs burn out quicker than normal ones in those sockets, in those light fixtures.
So Steve may not have intended to get me think of one more thing, but with something he said, It might be advantageous for us as one thing to work towards this goal is to, on our RM zone, anything over 10 houses, you have to have a charging station per so many townhouses or apartments for those people that have electric cars, that they can charge them in their parking area. So that might be another thing to look for in the future.
I would consider that, sure. I don't think we've ever thought of that, right? How come we don't require that in all of our multi-unit developments?
Right. Well, and I think that's what this person could be, that little light that goes on a little bit more often than it does with us, that says, hey, you guys are missing this. Hey, you guys are missing that. Do you have an
Right.
appetite for it? And so with what we're paying Lewis Young, I think, I mean, we'd have to have the numbers to know it, but we probably could afford somebody like that.
So we did that analysis 2 strategic plans ago. The range was roughly salary with benefits somewhere between 70 and 150,000, depending on what level of expertise you were looking for in there. So we estimated in that at that time about 100,000 salary plus benefits. Our current status right now, not having the Lewis Young number in front of me, is we have that contract with them. And I would estimate that John Rock's time is probably about 50% this, maybe 25 to 30% placemaking, and then the rest of his time is on other projects as I have him working on those. So if you did go to a full-time person, you'd probably be spending that 100,000. I don't think we spend that much on the Lewis Young contract. And really, in addition, even if you have somebody come on full time, they're going to come back. I already know this. And Steve actually alluded to it, probably also unconsciously. They're going to come back and say, I either need staff or I need funding for consulting services. So then you're right back working with Lewis Young anyway. So all of that is really just input to the idea that if you want to hire somebody full time and take that next step along this path, that's fine. But don't count on any existing funding for that. From a net standpoint, you're probably going up that one person.
So how did this work with the legislator then? Are we just going up one person and putting all that money out? Because how you put it to us is we would.
No, but I'm not
Saving
sure.
some of
I'm not
those.
sure how the two relate, Karen.
Well, it's just the same thing. We're using a consultant. We were using an outside source. So now we have a person in-house to do it all for us. And we were using those monies paid to help fund his wage.
The analogy
see
doesn't
the
work.
difference.
Yeah, the analogy doesn't work because what I'm telling you is that guy, if we went and hired him, let's use the legislative guy. If we, and we are obviously going out to hire that position, and if we existed in the same situation that I'm telling you we are in the sustainability standpoint, they would come on, they would make some evaluation of their environment, and then they'd come back and say, oh, I need extra consulting services for this purpose, and that purpose. That's what I'm telling you. This person would come in and say to us right now, because we've already had that discussion. This position, to be it really functioning the way you want it, really does require a multidisciplined set of expertise, which means you either hire a staff or you have a focus on it, like Lars is talking about with this one person, 100% full time. And that 100% focus is going to require other resources. Hence, then you would be making the choice again of, do we add more staff, or do we keep existing consultant work, or do we change to other consulting work?
Fascinating discussion. I just need to go back and clarify. When Tom spoke, the first thing he said, he supported Lars' concept. And I thought, and though he went into street lighting, Tom, where were you on this issue?
Okay. I think logs is good thing right there. He brought up. I think there's too many points, and it's going to be take a long time to do that. Just pick one thing, or maybe you can do together, and then see how things turn out. I'm interested in lighting right now for not only for the city property, but also for the residential area. So try to protect them, help them
So
out.
were you supportive of hiring a new individual or continuing with what we are?
Can we get anyone in our public work department and kind of like do the part-time job for this? We don't have to do a full-time job because it's a long project.
That's what we're doing right now.
Okay, and I'm okay with
Okay, well, that means we haven't got a majority there. So certainly we're going to leave this on here, I think, because there's certainly a lot of interest. The original concept, but not the hiring of a new person yet.
So lacking that clear majority for that particular step, Mayor, I would say though that I am going to continue on with John working that function and with Lewis Young, and we probably will be, not probably, we are considering right now some improvements and changes to that program in any event. So I will incorporate some of this direction that Lars was illustrating into that effort, if that's okay with the council.
And Wayne, I would add just something to that. If John is saying, hey, you know, if we're really going to get on top of this, or if Lewis Young is saying, well, if we're really going to get on top of this, we need to bring more people on. You know, we want to hear that too. I mean, you know, I might be in charge of cleaning, say, the Maverick Center, and I'll do the best I can. But you know what? I'm really going to go tell my boss, we need 10 more guys. And so if we're getting that kind of feedback, we ought to know that, and then we can go off in a different direction or put more money behind it or whatever.
Yeah, okay. And not to belabor the point, but we have had that discussion in this discussion before.
Okay.
So it's not new from a concept standpoint, but we certainly could flesh it out in terms of what that would mean.
I mean, I think that somebody that's been working with the program such as it is would have a better grasp on whether it needs to be expanded, whether we need more people, what we could accomplish than just me sitting here talking about it a couple times a year.
Right. But here also, I think that my hometown going to be that very good opportunity for us to work in my hometown, try to find out the particular area that we need to, you know, fix or do something to tackle with that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone, for considering this, and I'm pleased that we're going to continue to fight for the ideas that we have here for sustainability, and maybe next year we'll get.
We're counting on you, Lars, not to forget about it.
Well, if I get reelected.
Wait, are you up for election?
A question though, do you want to keep it on this strategic plan? These are typically things that we want that are new rather than ongoing programs. And I think from Wayne's comment, from everything we've heard, isn't this an ongoing thing? I mean, it's in place.
For sure. Yeah, regardless of whether it shows up on the strategic plan document as a task or not, it's ongoing, and we are continuing and growing this effort for sure.
I would like to see reporting on this with our next strategic plan, and see those efforts increased, and especially reporting on our goal for net zero emissions and how we're working toward that.
Okay.
Just one more comment with just actually a little bit of humor attached to it, Mayor. You might get the idea that John Rock spends a lot of time on this sector of his job, given the fact that he also actually drafts the strategic plan report document for me, and you'll see how many bullets are on this compared to any other items on the report.
I think it's good to keep it on the plan, just to keep it in front of us too, so that we don't, it doesn't just become Lars' problem. It's all of our problem.
And Lars, would you like to see a report more than just once a year? I mean, do you want a 6-month report of what projects are being looked at or anything? Or what is your goal with this?
You know, when I meet with Wayne, as we all meet with Wayne, we get reports about things that we're concerned about, and I'm satisfied with those that I'm receiving, and this annual report is fine with me.
Okay, thanks.
So do you want all of those on there? For example, the EV stations, the water audit, development ordinance, and communication efforts? Or just the sustainability?
I don't think we need all of those on there.
Then without objection, we'll leave the sustainability, and the others are somewhat moving forward. Okay. We ready to go on? Hearing no objections, Harmon Hall development or theater development? And this seems like, given, and I saw on our little notice that came out all the different plays that are going to be held, which I thought was excellent, by the way. I know that's somewhere else down here, but with this, I think, as I went through these, we're getting close to accomplishing most of this. These are still ongoing. For example, a full season. Well, we're not 100% there, but we're getting there. Do you want to leave this on or have any comments with it?
I think it's ongoing and probably doesn't need to be part of the strategic plan unless something else happens or doesn't happen.
Okay.
Because Mr. Pyle doesn't need any more direction, correct?
I don't believe so. I think we're good.
Okay.
I mean, the comments that I've just heard are pretty accurate in terms of we're on a path. We're definitely doing this full season of plays. Our relationship with Shakespeare Festival is pretty well established and developing. I just had exchanged voicemails last night and this morning with Frank Mack, for example. So yeah, I think we're on pretty good track.
Okay. Now we are at noon.
Oh.
And this is when we normally would take a break. And I think Jake has another commitment, so we're going to lose him until 2 o'clock. So good time to probably stop, and we'll continue with item 5 and go down the list when we come back at 1 o'clock. Is that okay? That's kind of what we had scheduled.
Sounds good to me. And
Sounds good.
I'm glad Jake doesn't have to do a lot of driving to get to his next meeting.
Yes. Okay. Well, then with that, let's see, remind me, we had a discussion on whether we sign out or sign back in.
If I remember
I'm going to
right,
sign out for the hour.
Sign out. Yeah.
Sign out. Okay.
Do we have to adjourn, or do we just say we're taking a 1-hour break?
I think we're just taking the break. I don't think we have to adjourn the meeting.
Perfect.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
See you at 1.